lot of people are feeling, that today might be a good day to call Holy Humor Sunday. So that is what I decided to do. Pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our salvation. Amen. As Jeannie alluded to in the announcements, I, along with a number of other people from the congregation, spent the last week in Cuba. And it was interesting to go there because an immersion trip, as she said, is not simply about going and getting cigars and rum, although I do think that there were suitcases full of that coming back. But to actually meet the people and talk to the people and see, it gives me strength because we have a strong church presence there and have for a very, very long time through the World Council of Churches, the National Council of Churches, the United Church of Christ, and the Cuban Council of Churches. In fact, some of our One Great Hour of Sharing money goes to programs like that around the world. Anyway, it's interesting because as you get to know people, and it's not, the normal tour where you see this, you're told about that, or whatever, you get to spend time with them and eat with them, and as the relationships build and the trust expands, because there's a lot of suspicion between them toward us and probably us toward them. You hear what's going on, and you hear the hopes and dreams of what might continue. And I found a lot of it interesting, especially when we discuss the outcomes of the American Revolution after many years and the outcome of the Communist Revolution after 50-some years there. Pros and cons on both sides. But that's a topic for another time. What I'd like to share with you and think about this morning was the experience I had as last Sunday we worshiped in a church connected with us through the United Church of Christ and the Council of Churches in Cuba. It was in a small shop area with chairs, folded chairs, and so forth. Very relaxed, very open. The people even waited at least a half hour to start worship so that we could come. I can't even imagine how many people would be going like this if we did that. And then, of course, they all began, and it was warm, and it was friendly, and it was relaxed, and the bathroom was behind the pulpit, so in the middle of the sermon, people just get up, they go back. It took me a while to figure out, what's that man behind the curtain, sort of thing. And a little boy was across the aisle, probably about 4 years old, and we waved at him, and then we smiled at him, and I went like this, and he came over and sat in my lap for most of the service with his little Bible storybook, and he read the Bible to me from beginning to end. He knew all the stories with the pictures in Spanish. Of course, I say buenos nachos, so you know how that goes. But the point was the friendliness and the joy of the service. And, an older woman at the end of the service, made sure she hugged all of us. And I don't know what she was saying to me, but her smile said it all. And, of course, they rolled out refreshments of the Cuban version of Oreos and pop, which was extravagant for them. Most of those people make about $20 a month. That's their income. If they get $140 a month, that's about it. So as I had time to reflect on that, it reminded me of the many times I've been around the world, whether in the Middle East or in Nicaragua or other places, where we go into situations and the people who are there, they don't have the beauty of the setting that we have. They don't go home to the lifestyle we have. But in that faith community, they find support and love and joy. The joy was obvious. the exuberation of praise and witness and the warmth that they shared with us. You know, it reminds me of all that we think we need that we don't. When worship was concluded and I had time, it made me think, at least a little bit, of how within our culture that we often feel is so good, that we have been experiencing a decline in a communal sense of joy and happiness. That is not probably what it should be. That joy and laughter in so many instances is absent from our schools, our community centers, our state halls, even our churches. That we're very good in our society at pointing and calling out and doing all those things. We rise to the occasion of analysis. We're a culture that analyzes everything. And not very often in a critical analysis of fairness and objectivity, but in one that is very pointed and sharply negative. And I don't know, when did that happen? When did we become that? When did we lose joy and laughter? And just old, good community fellowship that gives us satisfaction in not only our living, but in our living together. You know, growing up in the church, and I grew up in the old German Congregationalists, and Germans, at least then, they were scary. You know, and when you got two Germans together, you got three opinions, so you know how that goes. And my mom was very good at, she would make things out of handkerchiefs to entertain me. She's very creative, and sometimes I'd try to escape under the pews, and she'd grab me and pull me back. There was a price to pay for that when we got home. But as I grew older, it seemed to me, and I understand that. I understand that seriousness and that notion of trying to be sacred, because sometimes we're too relaxed. I understand that. But what I began to discover as I moved into seminary and on into ministry is the power that comes from just being together and laughing and having joy and sharing it. That no matter how hard your week was or your day or the week ahead or what you're dealing with, in this place, you can be open and vulnerable and laugh. And I began to see within Scripture, not always obviously, but subtly, that there is a lot of humor in the Bible. There's humor on the part of people, and there's humor on the part of God. I find rather interesting that in that big text with Elijah, the great prophet, fighting the many prophets of the god Baal, and they're on top of the mountain, and the big test to see who's the true God is to call down fire from heaven and light the altar fire of whichever prophet it was. And of course, to make it even harder for Elijah, they pour water on his wood. He succeeds. Whereas the prophets of Baal dance and shout and play music and do everything, and nothing happens. That's when in the Hebrew, Elijah turns to them and smiles, saying, "What's the matter, boys? Has your God gone to the potty?" Doesn't translate. It loses something in the translation. But that's kind of funny. Or in Genesis, God tells Sarah, Abraham, Sarah, right, that she's going to get pregnant and have a baby. She's 80 or 90 years old. That's not funny. But I guess the joke is on her because she did. And it says when she was told that, she laughed. And when she named the child, Isaac means he who laughed. Or how about the Hebrew slaves when they're freed? Moses leads them into the Sinai, and they're moving through the Sinai, and God's going to feed them, and he gives them manna, and they start complaining. Oh, that we could go back to Egypt where we had that good Egyptian Taco Bell. And God says, oh, boy, you don't like the manna? I'm going to give you manna. And just dumps it on them. You know, in my sick sort of way, I find humor in that. Mary, Jesus, Jesus must have had a tremendous sense of humor. I think of him traveling with that group and campfire talking, and anybody who's been a part of that, you know how that goes, how you share stories, and it goes on and on. And beside that, he probably had to have a good sense of humor to keep his sanity, because every time he tried to teach them something, they just didn't get it. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me. Please. There are difficult issues facing every generation, and ours is no exception. We have many these are challenging times with loaded complexities. Complexities that require serious critical thinking. And a follow-up dedication so that we can clearly discern where faith intersects life. That's theology. What does my faith have to do with how I live and how I act and how the world moves ahead? But we can't do any of that at the cost of losing feeling good about one another, about ourselves as a positive, feeling good about the work and the day and our contribution and our relationships and our life. What's the old saying? If I didn't laugh, I'd... Norman Cousins, well-known journalist of several decades ago, Norman Cousins wrote a book that I still recommend to people, Anatomy of an Illness. And it talks about his story as he was diagnosed with the disease, I don't recall it now, that caused a deterioration. And those of you who are smarter than me in the medical area know what it's probably called, but it's the collagen or something that holds the joints together and makes them work, deteriorates, and he went from walking to a walker to bedridden. And the doctors couldn't prescribe anything that would work. He saw that as his future. So he did a lot of reading on his own, and he discovered what happens when you laugh in your body, and he began to watch Laurel and Hardy movies and the Three Stooges and anything he could find that was funny. And he slowly got better and eventually returned to a normal life. And he recalls in that book other kinds of things of that nature. Not saying that this is the cure-all or this is the miracle that we are looking, but reminding the reader and reminding us of how much laughter and joy, even in the midst of challenges and struggles, brings out the best in us. It brings out promise and hope, and it gives us strength and endurance for the race ahead. So I'd like to conclude this morning by just sharing a few things in the hopes that they bring maybe a smile to your face, maybe a little laughter to your soul. How many baby boomers I got here? Raise your hand. Baby boomers? Baby boomers? You're getting older, right? We are. We're getting older. And maybe in the process of getting older, you remember that Roberta Flack song. The first time ever I forgot your face. Or the Beatles tune. Oh, I get by with a little help from my depends. Oh, I get by with a little help from my depends. Or the tale of a burglar who broke into a house and He's got his flashlight, and he's shining it all around, and he picks up a laptop that he sees on a desk and puts it into his bag, and he hears a voice behind him that says, "Jesus is watching." Shuts off his flashlight and looks around. He turns it on, and it shines on a parrot. And the parrot says to him, "Jesus is watching." And he looks at him and says, who are... The parrot says, "I'm just trying to help you." What kind of parrot are you? What's your name? And the parrot says, "Moses." Says, "Moses." "What kind of people?" The burglar says. "Name their parrot Moses." And the parrot says, "The kind of people who name their pit bull Jesus." And just to show you that I can take it as well as give it, all you Gator fans, let me share a few Nebraska jokes. Living in Colorado, I think I've heard them all. You all know that the N on the helmet stands for knowledge. You know, that never fails. That one never fails. But did you know that the football players, they write TGIF in every shoe? Toes go in first. But my favorite is the one about a lineman, a senior lineman, winner of an Outback trophy, great player, all Big Ten, who's having a little trouble with his grades around graduation time and is probably not going to get his diploma. And this is really big news because this guy is big. So he goes to the chancellor and he says to the chancellor, "Is there not some way that I can work it out? You know, I'm really close. I bruised and was bloodied and bled for the Big Red, and I was out there the whole time, played through injuries, I did it all." And the chancellor said, "You know, son, you're right. You're right. I have a deal for you. If on graduation day in Memorial Stadium with all those 90,000 people in attendance watching, you can come on the stage and answer one question and get it right, you get your diploma." Okay, so the day comes. And that's just big news across the state because everybody knows him. And, you know, they clap as everybody else walks across the stage. But when he gets to the base of the stairs and looks up at the chancellor and the chancellor looks at him, a hush across the stadium. He walks up to the chancellor and the chancellor looks at him and says, "One question. What's 2 plus 2? Oh, 2 plus 2. Oh. 4. And the whole stadium yells, "Let him try again. Let him try again." I have one about a brain transplant, but I'm not going to go with that one. I'll listen. Laughed, and the whole world, even the heavens, laugh with you. Cry. Friends, no matter what we face in these times, no matter what our personal, present, corporate, national, international situation is, let us be found among those who choose to face it with joy and laughter, the seeds of hope, that we might have and give the kind of strength that helps us to run the good race and fight the good fight and finish the course, and in the process, fully live.